So here's where the DFAM gets really fun, and that's with patching. So I'm going to show you a few different ways that are kind of common ways to patch this together, and hopefully that will get your creative juices flowing. You can come up with your own patches. Let's start with one of my favorites, and that's going to be going out of pitch and into noise. So what we have here is just a very, very, very simple kick going on the 1 and the 5 step. Now I've got only VCO 1 going in. The sequencer is shut off, so the pitch is doing nothing. But if I plug this in to pitch and noise level, as this pitch increases, so does the noise level. So what can happen is if we turn up the 3rd step, and the 7th step, let's turn down the other ones. It almost creates like a bass snare effect. So here's it without plugged in. Notice that the noise level was turned up a little bit, and I was controlling it by turning these pitches all the way down. But that's with it out. And then when we plug it in, so it's just a nice way when you have other stuff going on, it creates that almost like a bass snare effect. And that's going from the pitch out to the noise level in. Similar from going pitch out to noise level out, you can also go velocity out to noise level out and control the noise level through the sequencer. So here I have a sequence that's set up with a lot of FM amount and a little sequence going on. Let's plug velocity into the noise level. So if you notice on the 1 and the 5, just like the last patch, these two are turned up all the way. Before it had that kind of kick drum sound, but now if I plug it into the noise level, that cranks up every time the step 1 and the 5 hit. Let's hear it without it. With the noise level in again. So the next patch point I talked about a little bit in the previous video is the VCF mod. So just to go over that again, when anything goes into that patch point, noise is typically normaled here, but that takes away the noise generation. And suddenly this becomes an attenuator for the cutoff knob. I love patching into here because that allows me to control the cutoff amount. And there's tons of different ways to do that. So just to go over quickly what that does again, I'm going to run the same sequence as last time. And without anything patched, if I turn this up, it gets really fuzzy. Because right now, noise is going into it, so it's shaking this cutoff and creating that lo-fi distortion. But if I plug something into it, right now it's just a dead patch. It doesn't have any effect. So putting something in there immediately takes away noise generation as a source of modulating the cutoff. But we can plug something else instead of the noise into there. So in one of the previous videos, I plugged an LFO. So let's just go from the LFO out of the mother into the VCF mod of the DFAM. And what that will do is if you turn it up all the way, this cutoff amount is going to go crazy. But sometimes it's nice just to have things a little bit more subtle. We'll hear all of them. So if I turn it up all the way, it's almost as if the cutoff goes all the way up and all the way down, or close to it. And then turning it here is a much more subtle effect. And if I turn it all the way down, it has no effect at all. It's basically turning that off. This is also great if instead of plugging it into a triangle LFO, you could go into a square. And even if you had another module or something else to connect that LFO to a clock, you could have the cutoff synchronized and going up and down in time, which is great for adding effects. But here, let's hear what it sounds with the LFO square coming out of the mother into this, and I'm going to try as best I can to get it to line up. It's almost impossible, but we'll get some cool effects anyway. Okay, let's make it a subtle effect. I'm going to speed it up. More dramatic effect. Sometimes with these patchings, less is more. So I mean, that has very subtle but yet dramatic effect. And if you were to patch that into a track with other instruments going on, it would have a noticeable difference. Let's try going into the noise level from one of the envelopes. Let's hear what it sounds with it out. So that's just a nice way to get it to be a little bit more hard hitting on the front. Another great input is the FM amount. So if you remember, when we have this hard synced and we change this, the timbre is affected, but the pitch isn't. It stays locked in. So if you hear what that sounds like, and so we can use the different patch points to modulate this. It of course sounds great coming out of an LFO. So let's try that from the mother. And that would be similar to, again, just turning the knob manually. And that's great just because it changes it up so that, you know, you have one 8-step sequence and then the next one sounds just a little bit different. So it adds some variety to it. But we could also go from one of our envelopes. This is the VCO envelope. And then lastly, I'll just go through a few of these. I really like changing the decay amounts. So those are VCO decay, VCF decay, and VCA decay, specifically the VCA. So let's try plugging that from an LFO into the VCA decay. So you can hear how it gets tighter and looser, just like. Now again, this is one of those things that has a really dramatic effect, and sometimes less is more. And what I like to do oftentimes is use an attenuator to kind of control, so it's not these huge jumps of the LFO, but rather just kind of subtle undulation. So that frequently can be done with external modules. But let's hear what the LFO sounds like into the VCF decay. That sounds really cool too. I turn up the LFO amount. So you can create some really dynamic rhythms there depending on the LFO rates and everything else. Those are just a few of my favorite patch pairings. I sometimes mix them up, sometimes use them all. But it's a great intro, and I think you should just start playing around with it, making up great rhythms, and then making them enhanced by using the Patchbay. In the next video, I'm going to go over a couple of different ways to sync up the DFAM with the Mother 32 and the subharmonicon.